All right, to begin with, I will open up the decisions platform. It's a 100% web-based platform. So we develop our flows, rules, all the parts that makes up the decisions platform. We'll develop them through the web interface, and also there, the web interface is where you consume the data. Okay, so decisions as a platform, you can run it as a Linux Docker container, or you can run it as a Windows service. You can run it on-prem, or you can run it in the cloud, your private cloud, or wherever. So it's very flexible on the options on where to host it. It's also quite simple application to maintain. The Windows installation, for example, is one installation. It contains its own web server, and it doesn't have many prerequisites. So it's a very simple solution to get going with. If we look at what I have on my screen here, this is the end user portal of decisions, or the portal as they call it. This portal is used to publish pages, reports, and other data that end users might be interested in. You can also use it as a platform to start up your processes by running forms, for example. I know that there are a lot of portals out there already. You might have a SharePoint, maybe you have an IT portal of some kind, or HR portal. So you could also break out everything you see on these screens. You can break them out and well, inject them in your existing portals. Or you could use the front end of your existing software. Let's say use SharePoint, and you only use decisions for the background for gathering the data or presenting the data to the form. I won't talk much about the end user portal. We will head straight into the designer mode. This is where you develop all your processes and all your integrations and all your stuff. And to access that we click in the left bottom corner where it says switch to studio. This you can do if you're assigned as a developer or a designer, as it's called in decisions. And the very basics of decisions is you work with projects. So I have my project called electricity here. If I want to create a new one, I can click add folder, create a designer project, and I'll call this demo. So now I created a new project. My work now is to start populating this project with different parts of the solution. And you can see up here in the upper row, I have the option to create flows, rules, forms, reports, data types, integrations, etc. I will only have time to touch a few of these, but if it's something we need to go through, it's the flows. The flows are the basic building blocks of decisions. I would say you couldn't create a project without a flow. So what is a flow? I'll create a blank one real quick. So a flow is a kind of orchestration of steps, as they're called in decisions. Your point is to get from the start to the end. Some processes never reaches the end. Some processes might have multiple ends. And depending on what's happening in the logic, different end steps can be reached. To develop a flow, I will use steps from the toolbox on the left here. This contains many thousands of steps out of the box, and depending on what modules and features you add to decisions, you will get even more. You can even create your own without coding, but you can also, if you want to, create your own steps by coding. If you have a C# developer or someone who knows a little bit of C#, you can quite easily create your own steps. But I would say 99% of the times it's not necessary. You can build basically anything with the steps that are already in here. So what kind of steps do you have? Well, I have some favorite steps, some logging, fetch, create data, run a rule, run a subflow, etc., send an email. I want to do a super simple flow here right now. So I'll go down to data and I go down to numbers. The data category is where you manipulate data. Could be manipulate strings, numbers, lists, whatever. but I'll do something super simple here. I'll take two numbers and I add them together. So I just pick up the step and I drop it on my line, and it will be added to my process. All steps has a properties pane on the right. This is where you define your inputs to the step and the outputs. The inputs, of course, is the values you send into the step, and the outputs is the result of, in this case, addition of two values. So I could either just type in constants, 1 plus 1, and if I scroll down to the output, I can name the output. I call this result. Okay. So now I have a flow. It's not a very complex flow, but I can run it. So I'll just click debug. And this is a very nice feature of many no-code platforms, but I really like the one in Decisions. Is this graphical, well, where we show the results in a graphical way, and we can always check on each step. I can right-click them. I can see the input and the output data. So I can see that into this step, I sent a 1 and a 1, and the output is 2. So in this very simple example, it makes no sense, but if you have a large project and you're running a lot of steps and you have a logical problem somewhere, I mean, the data you're getting out of the flow is not what you're expecting, then it's quite easy to go in here and check all the input, output, and find out where did I do something wrong in the logic. In this case, I just hard-coded 1 plus 1. A more real example would be to use variables, and you can, in a flow, for example, add inputs. So you click the start component and you have the flow input data. And here I can define instead, let's say I'll define a variable called number 1 and number 2. Then I get to select the type, and in this case, I'll select a decimal. The same thing for number 2. So I have two numbers that are being sent into my flow. And instead of hard coding in this step, I'll pick those variables up. You can see I have two given inputs here now, number 1 and number 2. So I'll do, instead of a constant, I do select from flow. And I pick up number 1. I'll do the same for number 2. And if I debug this flow this time, you'll see that it asks me for the values for the inputs. So let's say I want to add 1 and 2. Yeah. And I run the debugger. We check the output. I get a 3. So that seemed to have worked. I can also output data from the flow. And then I click the end component and I tick the result. That was the name of the result from my addition. So I click result and it will be added as an output here. So now I created a simple flow that adds two numbers. I mean, not super complicated. The reason why I did this was also to show you that how you run these flows. So I mentioned you could use the portal, and there you can publish like a flow that executes and maybe shows a form. So we have the show form step here. So that's one way, publishing it to the portal, or maybe publishing it to a third-party portal or whatever, where you're expecting a user to be shown a form and they can input data. But Decisions can also publish their flows as REST APIs. So you can, from other systems, maybe your in-house developed systems or any other system that supports connecting to REST APIs, you can do that quite simple by just up in the right corner, choose which integration type you want to use. And in this case, I select API service, and I'm fine with that. I just click OK, or sorry, done. Now this flow already has been published as a REST API. So I can easily click View, and we will be taken to a Swagger-like interface where you can try out and see how to integrate with this REST API. So I'll actually go to the Test tab. Here we can see the different methods that this supports. You can control this, which methods you want to show. But in this case, I'll use a post. It shows me example. Yeah, I'm expecting a number 1 and a number 2. So I'll say number 1 is 3 and number 2 is 5. And if I run this flow, you will see the result as a JSON output. So these are the very basics of decisions. You have the flows, you add your steps. There's thousands of steps. Some of the steps here are very unique for, there is a step for creating a ticket in ServiceNow, for example. But you can also generate your own integrations. So let's take the ServiceNow example. Yeah, we have a catalog of pre-created steps in there. But sometimes, I mean, ServiceNow is a huge product. You can't possibly create a step for each of the different functions there. But a good thing with decisions is you always have these wizards and stuff to help you create new steps that, for example, connects straight to the ServiceNow REST API and access any functionality they have there.